enforce those laws. The state in 07 tried to pass a law to make that happen. And it got so watered down by the time it was passed that it became impotent. It was going to, if you were a business that knowingly hired an illegal immigrant or did not use the E-Verify system, you would lose your business license. That was the original intent of the bill. After it meandered its way through the sausage maker that's called legislation, it came out that we would only get your business license if the Department of Justice came in and found you guilty of a violation. So really it just took all the ability to enforce that right out of the state's hands. So that's number one. Number two is obviously we have to secure the border, much more than it is. Now I'm not a proponent of building a big Berlin Wall that stretches from coast to coast, but there's a lot of high-tech tools that we can use to secure our border. The Border Patrol needs to be increased. And in addition, you've probably heard the stories. I mean, there's corruption within the Border Patrol, where a lot of the Border Patrol guys are, helping move people across the border. That type of activity has to be stamped out. So I think if you take away incentives that stem the flow and you secure the border to stop anyone else who's still trying to get here, but that's probably the best way to go about it. And by removing incentives, that also means medical care. And it's a big drain on University Medical Center. Like I said, I work in the ER there, and if I do a day shift, which starts at 6 in the morning, usually the first 5 to 7 people I see waiting are people that are there for dialysis therapy that don't have a Social Security number, solely because they have no place else to go. So I think it all ties in together with that unemployment rate that we're seeing. Yes?
Youth Capital Fund, and one of our goals is to increase participation among students and the community in politics. First of all, we think it's important for more people to be involved, especially our demographic, and then also what do you think we can do at the federal level to make that happen?
Sure. Well, I think it's critically important that you get involved. I mean, I say, government does one of two things. Either it does something for you, or it does something to you. Whichever one that's going to be depends upon how active you are involved in the process. If you just sit there and take what comes down the pike and are not engaged, then you will have something done to you. If you're engaged, whether it's just by making your opinions known, whether it's by getting active within a political party, whether it's by helping candidates, you now have a voice in shaping the very policies that are going to come back to affect you at all levels of government, whether it's city council, state legislature, or at the federal level. Because every one of those entities are making laws and passing policies that come back to affect you, not just as a student, but as a resident of Southern Nevada, as an American. And so it's critically important, and I think we saw a big uptick in the involvement of the younger voters in 2008. And hopefully that gets sustained. And we see an ever-increasing involvement. Because it's critically important that those that are running for office and those that serve have a balanced view of what's going on. And the way to get that is to have a diverse constituency that's willing to be involved and let you know what their needs, wishes, and wants are. Yes. Question on No Child Left Behind. I thought when No Child Left Behind was first proposed that it was a good concept with a very flawed execution. And because it came down to trying to treat everybody the same. And kids aren't widgets. They're not, no two kids are going to be alike. And we actually addressed something similar to that at the state level in 07 when we allowed an alternative pathway to get a standard diploma from high school by saying, some kids are visual learners. Perhaps they can, put together a portfolio of work that demonstrates that they understand the math and the science without having to take the proficiency exam in math and science or passing it. because there has to be alternatives. And I think that's where my undergraduate background in education helped mold some of that legislation. The other part of it, and you'll hear arguments on both sides, some say that No Child Left Behind was fully funded to be able to have the impact that was intended. You hear others say it wasn't fully funded. I think that here in Southern Nevada, we did not receive our share of federal dollars necessary to make No Child Left Behind work for us, if it was ever going to work. The other thing is how you're graded on whether or not you're making AYP, adequate yearly progress. Every demographic group in your school has to make adequate yearly progress. So if you're in a school that has 2 kids from Mali, and one of them fails, you didn't make adequate yearly progress because you're less than 50%. Yeah. Yeah, and that's just it. Once you make it, I mean, what's your incremental gain going to be? The other issue with Title I schools is that you get that extra money to buy certain things, to do certain things, and then once you make your benchmark and you no longer qualify as Title I, all that stuff gets taken away from you. So you're almost being penalized for being successful. A lot of the technology that's poured into schools, Title I schools, which is, for those of you who don't know, Title I is determined on your percentage of free and reduced lunches, on how many kids in your school get free and reduced lunch. And so if you qualify for that, you get all this extra technology to try to help your students. So they assume that kids on FRL require additional educational supplements. So you do okay, and now you get more and more of your kids off, and you're doing better on your tests. They can come in and take all that technology that you purchased with Title I money, take it away, and shift it to another Title I school. And so those are the issues that have to be addressed, that you can't penalize people for performing. You can't penalize them for meeting the benchmarks that you told them to meet. You've got to make sure that if there is a mandate to do certain things, that the funding is there to meet that mandate, and not pushing it off to the state. It's not a state requirement, it's a federal requirement. And you've got to make sure that it's not a one-size-fits-all mentality, which unfortunately is what No Child Left Behind is. Question over here? Okay. Yes. I think that the public options as they've been proposed in the current bills will turn healthcare upside down in the United States. Not to say that we don't need an option for people who otherwise can't afford healthcare or health insurance. That's really what it is. It's for people who can't afford health insurance. But the current public options, my opinion is that the government has no role and no right to come in and manipulate the free markets. And that's exactly what they're trying to do, is they're trying to manipulate the free market. And you can look at how they've done it already. They've done it by taking over the automakers. I mean, if you look at it really, the federal government has become the largest automaker, it's become the largest banker, it's become the largest insurance company, it's the largest mortgage player, and now it's trying to be the largest healthcare provider. And it's doing that all with money that they borrow from China, because we don't have any. $1.4 trillion deficit this fiscal year. So you can't come in and say, oh, well, it's the whole insurance company's feet to the fire and make them lower their rates. Because the government program is so heavily subsidized that there's no possible way that an insurance company is going to be able to match their rates and stay in business. And so then you start down that slippery slope of having insurance companies, private insurance companies, go out of business. They talk about, well, if you like the policy you have, you can keep it. Well, you can maybe for the first 5 years. Because after that, every insurance company, every policy is going to have to meet the same rating requirements as the ones that they're putting into these bills. In addition, no one else can ever buy into that policy that you currently have. They're going to be closed, except if it's your kids, a dependent of somebody who's already on the policy. So as people leave that policy, and as the rates become set by the government, the insurers no longer going to be able to offer that policy. Now you're forced to make a switch. So you're really not able to keep the policy that you have. It's just going to take a little bit longer for it to happen. There are other alternatives. I've talked about, I believe that